Happy days.
Great stuff. So thank you very much, Jon Holgate from the University of Cambridge.
Apparently I was going to talk about Jerome. I'm not. I'm going to talk about something slightly different. So I'm from Cambridge, as I've just been told, and I'm here to talk about how we networked or provided wireless network for the Tour de France last year. Not for all of it, just for the bit that went to Cambridge. So a little bit of background on wireless. We're in the process of significantly increasing the wireless deployment at Cambridge. That's a map of the city centre. All of the blue buildings are university buildings. There's 360 of them. The yellow ones are college buildings. There's twice as many college buildings. And the red ones are affiliates. So they're also university buildings. And we're in the process of trying to have ubiquitous wireless across the estate, which is taking a while. But it's fairly straightforward. You send somebody in, they do a wireless heat map. They go around with a survey. You figure out how many access points you need. We use Aruba. Well, you don't. You figure out which access points you need because there's a whole range of them. You specify up the number and you deploy them. Except for a few of the buildings are listed buildings. So you can't screw things into the wall. You can't drill through the wall. Some of the walls are 3 foot thick, so the signal doesn't go through it anyway. So that's more complicated. The slightly newer buildings, the beginning of the 20th century, they've all got asbestos. So again, you can't drill into the walls, or not without an asbestos survey. And the really modern buildings act as perfect Faraday cages, as you're probably all familiar. So wireless deployment is tricky, and every building's unique. So we have to take them on a case-by-case basis. Until a couple of years ago, we had a fairly simplistic approach to wireless deployment. So you take a building, you take the office space, you provide wireless to all the offices, which is something most people do, which is kind of pointless. I've got a PC in my office and it's got a cable connected to the back. I mean, wireless is great for keeping my Facebook up to date, but it's not, the point of wireless is it's meant to be mobile. You're meant to roam with it. So it's about putting it in the more useful roaming places. So we did something unusual and we went and spoke to the students. And we said to the students, where would you like it? What's the most important place for wireless? Expecting them to say the library, the debating hall, maybe the Botanic Gardens. Of course, that's not what they said. They said pubs, cafes, and green parks, which once you get past the initial allergic reaction that that's ridiculous, I've got enough work and that's not my estate, they are our customers and it is our service. So it's not completely irrational response to consider this. So this has been roughly on our agenda to get, or it was a nice to do, put wireless out in the public places, in the campus. I also sit on an advisory panel for Connecting Cambridgeshire. Now, most counties have this. This is a council-led local authority body which has government money to provide superfast broadband to properties. And it was on one of these, or after one of these meetings, that a local person from Connecting Cambridgeshire said to me, the Tour de France is coming to Cambridge. We want to be a connected city. We'd really like wireless in the city centre for the Tour de France. Can you provide it for us? And if it's any incentive, we'll give you access to some of our buildings to mount stuff on. And you can leave it there afterwards if you want. Which kind of fitted in roughly with our agenda. That was in January last year. So that was 6 months before the Tour de France. So I went away and I sat down with some of my key colleagues and said, right, should we even try? Is this even likely? Well, we know we can roll out wireless. We roll out 1,000 access points a year. It's another access point. It's another controller. So we can add access points. That's not a problem. And we've got a unique opportunity to get access to city, county council buildings. So that's a good thing, and they've approved that in principle. We didn't actually have any money for this project. We've never put an external access point outside. We presume they work the same. Who knows? We've never done free public Wi-Fi, so all of our wireless till that point had been Eduroam, or our local guest ticketing system. I've no idea you can read the stats, but I've no idea what actually happens when you put an access point outside. How far does the signal go? What happens when you've got stone buildings either side, or glass buildings, or green space? And finally, do you need planning permission? I mean, can you just put these things up, or do you need a permission from somebody? The other thing we didn't know is how many people were coming. So I went back to the council, I sent them an email and said, how many people? And they said our preliminary analysis suggests between 5,000 and 150,000. Brilliant. So bearing that in mind, on the flip side, it looked like a fun project. So we approved it with all of those risks. And that was the first week in February, the very beginning of February. So that's the date, and you don't want to go live on that date because that's the date the Tour de France leaves Cambridge. So you want to go live a little bit before. So what did we do? We cut our cloth accordingly, and we looked at where it actually started, where the Grand Depart goes from, and what's the route through town. That's where the crowds would be. Let's go for that. Let's keep it simple. So we had the map. We took out a red pen, and we drew where we thought access points should probably go. It was as sophisticated as that. Putting them on university buildings where we could, because we have network there, so we can backhaul. And then we've also got a fibre optic network, and that's great, because then we don't have to worry about any particular access point being within 90 metres of a cabinet, as long as we can have power close to the access point, and we can put a media converter between the fibre and the copper, and inject power into the media converter. These things can be 300 metres from a switch or 2 kilometres. It doesn't make any difference. So as long as we're somewhere near our own fibre optic network, we're golden. So we made a very big map. That's about 10 foot tall, about 12 foot across. And we drew lines to all the places where we thought we would want an access point and came up with an action plan, a project plan. Each one looks like that. So for any particular access point, you need the initial survey and coverage plan, so you have to guess how far the signal is going to go and how many people it will cover. Have to make sure you've got premise approval for whoever building you're going to put it on. You need planning approval, potentially. Power arrangements agreed, so who's going to pay for the electricity. GBN is our fibre access. Agree exactly where you're putting it on the building. Get a way leave, so if you have to dig up the ground to put in a bit of fibre, you need an agreement that you can then return if it gets broken. So that's usually from the landowner. A section 50 if you happen to want to dig up a bit of pavement or road, and this is going to be by the road, so that's from the Highways Agency. You need to order the equipment, you need to install your fibre, you need to install the equipment, you need to test it, and you need to do some radio frequency testing. So that's for each and every access point. Local authority, that was the one that scared us the most. Do you need planning permission? No idea. So we went off I basically cycled into town, knocked on the door of the local planning authority, went in and said, this is what I want to do. I didn't have one, or we didn't know what the things looked like or the dimensions, other than a printout I'd taken off Google. I said, this is what I want to do. I want to put it in the city centre. Do I need planning authority approval? And the answer was no, you don't, unless you want to put it in a conservation area. And that's the conservation area in Cambridge, which was disappointing. But he said it should be fairly straightforward. All you need to do is very basic planning application. Bring it to us and we should approve it. This shouldn't be a problem. I've never done I've done one for my own house, but I've never done one for work, a planning application. So I went over to our estate management department because they put up buildings all the time, right? They dig stuff up. There's a few guys, there's some nice guys there. So I knocked on the door, said, this is what I want to do. Can you do this? And the guy I spoke to said, yeah, fine. Brilliant. So I left it with him. Didn't hear anything for 2 weeks. In the meantime, he's asked his boss for permission, who's asked his boss, and it's gone up to the Resource and Management Committee Secretary, who's pretty senior at Cambridge, who sent me a wonderful email. Estate management don't have time to do me a planning process. It's not appropriate for anybody other than estate management to get planning approval, and in any case, timescales make it unachievable, which was heartening to hear. So I went back and said, look, sorry, you misunderstand. I wasn't trying to dump work on estate management. I just thought they might be able to help. Leave it with me, I'll do it. I'll figure out how to fill in the planning application. The response I got was paragraph 3.6 of the Sites and Buildings Regulations implies that the university cannot seek planning consent without endorsement of the building committee. And they meet every 6 months, which isn't very helpful. As far as I can see, this project is highly unlikely to proceed. Brilliant. So I did the only thing possible, which is I didn't tell any of my team and I sulked for 2 days. And then I decided I'd actually look at what the Sites and Buildings Regulation document looks like. So I went off to the old schools, pulled out this leather-bound volume, front page looks like that, and found 3.6, which wasn't applicable at all. It was actually 3.7, so I knew I was onto a good thing. And it says the Buildings Committee oversees applications for planning approvals for the operational estate, da-da-da-da-da. And then I read it again and I thought, operational estate. I only need the Buildings Committee approval for a planning application if I put this on university buildings. If I don't use the university at all, this will be much simpler. So I went back to the team, I said, right, brilliant, we can still proceed. We just don't have to use anybody else in the university. It will make it much easier. So we broke it down into two areas. We've got the streets and we've got a large public space, which is Parker's Piece. Now that's very large. It's about 500-600 meters across from side to side. Aruba, our supplier, gave us some wonderful software which allowed us to draw green umbrellas on top of it, which basically doesn't tell us anything other than the wireless signal won't go all the way from the edge to the middle. You need to put something in the middle, which is good because there is a lamppost in the middle. There's one, it's called Reality Checkpoint, it's very famous. It's famous because it's the only listed lamppost in the country. I did ask if we could put an access point on there. They laughed. And then they said, well, we are going to put up some more lampposts. Well, that was the sort that they'd been trialling, these things that popped out the ground occasionally and they went back down, which isn't ideal. And they said, no, we're going to put up, they're rubbish, agreed. And we're going to put up more like the original, but they're going to be copies. I said, right, can I put an access point on that? It's got power, it's up high. They said, no, it's been through the Conservation Committee. Right, so we went away for a few days, and then one of my members of staff, ridiculously, said, well, what about the finial at the top? Could you put an access point in the top of a lamppost? I don't know. What do access points look like? So we'd already had received one. That's a Access 175. They're quite big and rectangular and they're omnidirectional or single directional. That's no good. But it was at this time our Aruba supplier came down to us and said, no, we've got a new access point on the way. It does 802.11 AC, it's the latest standard, it's good. And it's round, ignore the arm, bucket shaped, brilliant. I said, can we have some of them? He said, well, not really. We haven't started manufacturing them yet, but we have tested them and they look quite good. This was sometime in late March. So we considered the possibility of designing the top of a lamppost on the basis of an access point that wasn't coming off of production yet, and there was no controller firmware that made it work. But Aruba were very sure that they'd get them to us in time and it would probably work. There is a point in a project when you have so much risk that a little bit more doesn't actually seem to make much difference. So that's exactly what we did. We spoke with our engineering department, who did a metal disc, and we spoke with a plastics manufacturer who did a finial design, and we put an access point on top of a conservation lamppost. Now inside there you've got a bit of copper that runs down to the bottom, and you've got a media converter with a power injector, and so the fibre runs underground. And the good thing is, because they were putting these in, they were digging trenches to put electricity to each of the lampposts, which means we took the opportunity to extend our fibre optic network by throwing down a bit of tube at the same time. So, in town, what do we do for the rest of town? Well, we can't put it on buildings, but in the corner, somebody noticed that there are a lot of CCTV posts. Now, CCTV posts are ugly, so nobody cares what they look like. They're up high, they've got power, and they're pretty sturdy. So we went and knocked on the door of the CCTV guy, who was delighted to have anybody who would speak to him who wasn't criticising, because he thinks everybody hates him, which they probably do. But we liked him. He was super helpful. In fact, he gave us a map of all of their CCTV cameras and a key to access all of them if we wanted to. So we then set about installing, you can see on the left-hand side, access point, you can probably see it, at the bottom of the CCTV camera. So we went round, and then halfway through doing it, somebody said, one of my team said, Do we need lightning arresters? I don't know. We haven't really thought about lightning arresters. So we spoke to Aruba and they said they do them, but they don't have any available, not in the time frame that we need. So we found a third-party lightning arrestor provider, put them in, plugged it all on, turned it on, and to be honest with you, it was shocking. 5 gigahertz worked, 2.4 gigahertz was pitiful. It connected on some devices, it didn't on others, no idea why. Took us about 3 weeks to realise these things, which are all over city centres, GSM masks, broadcast on 2.1 gigahertz. Lightning arresters act as antennas. So effectively the lightning arrestor was taking all the signal and drowning out the 2.4. What you need is a bandpass filter. Aruba lightning arresters come with a bandpass filter built in. The third-party ones we bought hadn't. Fortunately, our colleagues at Anglia Ruskin, we happened to have a meeting and discuss our woes, they had ordered quite a few of these anyway and had some spare. Right, moving on. So we've got the access points, they're up and running, they're broadcasting Eduroam. Janet, at the same time, had just done a deal with B-Sky-B, the cloud, for free public Wi-Fi. So in lieu of trying to design our own authentication system, web content filtering, safety mechanism, we basically subscribed to the devil and got ourselves a contract. They do nice branding. What they don't do is spell cloud correctly in their legal contract. They spelled the cowed repeatedly, which is a sign of quality. Media launch, so we launched 10 days before the Tour de France came to town. Arm on the left, somebody who's kind of connecting Cambridge is in the middle. Head of the council, who I've never seen before, turned up for the media event, as did about 30 other people. And on the day, well, it kind of worked. Here's the stats. So this is the week before, and you can see days before. So you can see the days before, and you can see the spike in traffic on the day. That's actually concurrent connections. The red line is when the cyclists leave Parker's Piece. So people put down there or disconnect from the web and take photos. The green is when they've left Cambridge. So instantly people start uploading to Vimeo or YouTube or whatever they're doing. Numbers, that's the area we covered. About 22,000 devices connected on the day. And that's been pretty consistent ever since we've left the stuff there. Observations. Devices was lower than the footfall. Not that surprising. It's being used at capacity all the time. Connection problems. I connected, some people couldn't. The cloud router is under spec. They have a price scale list from small to very large. We're off the bottom with our public area stuff. They're not really designed for large scale implementations, and we need better monitoring. Where do we go next? We're expanding to other parks at the moment. As the council replace lampposts, we're putting in more access points, expanding our fibre network. Beer festival, boat houses, that kind of stuff. We're going to look at replacing the cloud with something better, quite frankly. Lessons learned. Final point, I know we're running out of time. Lessons learned. Not a lot of cities have free public wireless. We worked with Vanix, who's our supplier, Aruba, the manufacturer, didn't really work with the university. The county council, the city council, the Connecting Cambridgeshire, the Highways Authority, people that dig up roads, CCTV. There was 22 different groups we worked with in 4 months. The reason cities don't do this is very complicated, and it's not technically complicated. The actual turning on access points is the easy bit. It's the getting everybody to work together that's difficult. That's the team. So there was 5 of us that did it alongside the day job. Any questions? Fair enough?
No, several questions here. John? Very entertaining job, thank you. You said you no budget beginning.
Mm-hmm.
What's the bottom line for all this again today?
So the way we worked it was as most of you have different pots of money for different things. So some of this came out of our fibre optic network funding as part of the expansion process. Some of it came out of our wireless deployment process. About 39,000 full cost. About 25 access points.
Hi, Andrew Steele here, University of Leeds. We're looking at possibly setting up some kind of agreement with the cloud, BSkyB cloud, but obviously from your experience you seem to have possible problems with them. Is that just because of the actual scale of the deployment, and if you're just looking at a campus type deployment for public Wi-Fi, it could be a better solution?
I mean, in many ways, the cloud, we worked on very small, very tight timescales, and they were very helpful. The stuff actually worked. It's still working. The authentication, great. The skinning, good. The cost is not cheap. We're paying about £1,000 a month for 30 access points. If we were to roll that out across our estate, that would become prohibitively expensive. My gut feeling is they're really, really well designed and set up for individual Cafe Neros or Starbucks or whatever it is who subscribes, where you have 2 or 3 access points in a location. They're not really designed. I mean, not many people do wireless networks. So that's only part of our wireless network. We get 50,000, 60,000 devices connected a day. And that's not something they're particularly familiar with. So the criticism I have of them is because we're probably an unusual case rather than them themselves.
Right, we'll have to wrap it up there. So thank you very much, John.
Okay.